Most people assume that hesitation in leadership is a competence problem. They think that when a leader delays a decision, it means that the leader doesn't know what they're doing, or maybe that they lack confidence, or that their responsibility is being avoided. But in real organizations, hesitation is rarely about intelligence or ability, but more often than not, hesitation is a signal that responsibility is unclear, unowned, or emotionally overloaded. And when leaders hesitate, teams don't simply slow down, they start to compensate. They interpret that silence. They fill that gap and they start making their own assumptions about what is happening. And over time, that compensation creates misalignment. So today, we're going to talk about why capable leaders hesitate under pressure and what actually restores that clarity. But before all of that, I want to introduce you to LTR Hub. This channel focuses on leadership development, communication clarity, and team alignment in real world work environments. With that being said, let's get into today's topic: why leadership decisions matter under pressure. In the first episode of this series, we actually talked about the idea that the leader is the first system. We are the first system because leadership problems rarely start with a strategy. They start beneath the skill, inside of the leader. In the second episode, we talked about presence because people respond to leaders before they listen to them. And today, we're going to talk about decisions under pressure because when the leader is unclear, momentum collapses. And one of the most common ways clarity collapses is hesitation. Not strategic patience, not thoughtful discernment, but hesitation that stalls motion and leaves people guessing. Hesitation that creates a vacuum. In that moment, a leader creates vacuum, teams begin to feel it, sometimes with assumptions, sometimes with anxiety, sometimes with the quiet frustrations, and other times with walkarounds that seem helpful in the moment, but slowly damage alignment. So the real question becomes, what actually causes the hesitation? Hesitation is not incompetence. In many workplaces, hesitation is interpreted as incompetence. If a leader delays a decision, people often assume that they don't know what they're doing, they're avoiding responsibility, or they simply aren't strong enough to lead. But that interpretation is usually wrong. Many hesitant leaders are actually very capable, and they're thoughtful, they care about the people, they take responsibility seriously. They understand the consequences of their decisions, and ironically, that sense of responsibility is often why hesitation appears. Because hesitation is rarely about what the leader can do, and it's about what the leader believes they are responsible for carrying. When the cost of decision feels high, when the outcomes feel uncertain, and when the weight of being the one who chooses feels exposed, leaders pause. Not because they lack intelligence, but because the responsibility feels heavy. So why do leaders hesitate under pressure? Well, in real organizations, hesitation usually comes from one of three places. Responsibility is unclear. Sometimes leaders hesitate because the boundaries of their role are not defined. They're asking themselves questions: is this my decision to make? Is this something I recommend or something that I own? Do I escalate this or resolve it here? Do I decide or delegate? When responsibility is unclear, leaders delay because they're trying to avoid stepping outside of the role, but the delay itself creates uncertainty. Reason number two: responsibility is emotionally overloaded. This happens when leaders believe they must carry more than actually is theirs. They assume they must protect everyone from discomfort, get the decision perfectly right, or resolve every tension personally. But leadership doesn't mean absorbing emotional consequence of the decision. When leaders believe every outcome must satisfy everyone, decisiveness becomes psychologically expensive. And when decisions feel expensive, hesitation increases. Number three, responsibility is unowned. This one is real subtle because unowned responsibility can still look like activity. Leaders can appear busy while still avoiding ownership, and they schedule more meetings, they gather more opinions, they say things like, let's have one more conversation. But underneath activity, the moment hasn't really happened. The moment where a leader says, this is my decision, this is the direction, this is what we're doing next. Without that moment, momentum is stalled. What hesitation does to teams? When leaders hesitate, teams rarely sit still. They interpret what's happening and they adjust their behavior. Three patterns usually show up repeatedly. First, people stop surfacing problems. When hesitation becomes common, team members start thinking, if I bring this up, it'll create more uncertainty. So they just stay quiet, which means that the leader receives less information, not more. So the second thing that happens is that people create parallel decision paths. This means that teams start making informal decisions just to keep the work moving forward. They route around leadership. At first, this can look like initiative, but over time, it creates fragmentation, and different parts of the organization begin to operate on different assumptions. Number three, people become anxious or they become disengaged. Some teams respond to hesitation with anxiety. Others respond with quiet resignation. They stop investing emotionally because they no longer trust that clarity is coming. And this is why leadership isn't only about making decisions. Leadership is about creating confidence that clarity will arrive when it needs to. When leaders hesitate repeatedly, that confidence begins to erode. Pressure reveals formation. Here's what we need to go deeper, or where we need to go deeper. Pressure is often blamed for leadership problems, but pressure doesn't create leadership issues. Pressure reveals what hasn't been formed yet. It reveals where clarity is missing. It reveals what capacity has not been built. This is why two leaders can face the exact same challenge and respond completely differently. One becomes clear, the other is reactive or delayed. Not because one is smarter, but because has greater formation in that area. This is where the transformation pillar of LTR framework becomes essential. Transformation is about surface behavior. Transformation is about becoming the kind of leader who remains clear under the weight. Not perfect, clear. Because leadership is rarely tested when everything is calm. Leadership is tested when consequences are real. The responsibility filter. So what do leaders actually do with this? One simple tool is what I call the responsibility filter. When pressure increases, pause and ask three questions. First, what is actually mine to decide? Not what I have opinions about, not what I'm involved in. What decision is truly mine to make? The second question, what is mine to steward? Not own, steward. Some outcomes require leadership without requiring emotional ownership. You can steward a process without carrying the entire emotional weight of it. Finally, the third question, what clarity is required right now? Not the final clarity, not the perfect clarity. Often, what teams need most is the simple next step, the next boundary, the next direction. And this leads to an important distinction. Decisiveness is not speed, decisiveness is alignment between responsibility and action. Some leaders decide quickly because they feel no responsibility, and others delay because they feel too much. Healthy leadership sits right in the middle, responsible without overload, clear without recklessness, and steady. Decisiveness and communication. There's one more piece that leaders often overlook. Decisions don't create momentum unless they're communicated clearly. A leader can make the right decision and still produce confusion if the team doesn't understand. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What success looks like and what changes now? Decisiveness is not only internal clarity, it's external clarity. It's making the decision understandable to the people responsible for executing it. That's what builds confidence. So if hesitation is often a responsibility signal, the deeper work is not simply be more confident. The deeper work is be more clear about what you are carrying. Because when responsibility becomes clear, decisions become clear. And when decisions become possible, momentum returns. In this episode, we talked about why capable leaders actually hesitate and why hesitation rarely is actually a competence problem. It's usually a signal that responsibility is unclear, unowned, or emotionally overloaded. The goal isn't perfection, the goal is alignment between responsibility and action. So momentum can move forward again. In the final episode of this series, we're going to go even deeper. We're going to talk about formation because leadership that lasts is rarely built in visibility. In both leadership development and in scripture, formation consistently precedes responsibility. As you reflect on this conversation, I want you to consider where hesitation may be showing up in your leadership and ask yourself, what responsibility needs to be clarified or re-owned? The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness, alignment, and follow through. If this conversation helped you, you're welcome to explore more teachings here on LTR Hub.